On a quiet morning in the small town of Elmwood, the gentle hum of life moved on as it always did. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee from the local diner, where townsfolk exchanged greetings and stories. But for Linda Harrington, the day was anything but ordinary. She sat alone in her modest living room, clutching a folder that held her most personal and profound decisions. The sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting patterns on the walls, but her mind was clouded by the weight of years of sacrifice and disappointment. Linda was a woman of quiet strength. Widowed at 35, she had devoted her life to raising her 3 children, Jack, Sarah, and Michael. Life had been anything but kind, yet Linda had managed to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. She had worked long hours at the local bakery, her hands rough from kneading dough and her feet aching from standing all day. Despite the physical toll, Linda never complained. Her only goal was to give her children the opportunities she never had. Her children, however, were a different story. Jack, the eldest, had always been ambitious but not in the way Linda had hoped. He dreamed of wealth and status, often at the expense of others. Sarah, the middle child, was charming and persuasive, using her wit to get what she wanted. And Michael, the youngest, seemed lost in the shadows of his siblings, mimicking their behavior to gain their approval. Linda had hoped her unwavering love and sacrifices would guide them, but as they grew older, she realized that her dreams for their futures were not aligned with their own. The first signs of trouble began when Jack turned 21. He came to Linda with a business proposal that he claimed would change their lives. It involved a hefty loan from her savings, which Linda had painstakingly built over the years. When she hesitated, Jack accused her of not believing in him. The guilt was unbearable, and Linda eventually relented, handing over a significant portion of her savings. The business failed within 6 months, and Jack moved on as if nothing had happened, never acknowledging the strain he had put on his mother. Sarah was no different. She had a penchant for luxury and often manipulated Linda into funding her extravagant lifestyle. Whether it was a designer handbag or a vacation with friends, Sarah always found a way to make Linda feel obligated. "You deserve to have a happy daughter," she would say, her tone laced with entitlement. Michael, though less demanding, was equally complicit. He would ask for smaller amounts, money for gadgets or nights out, but over time, these requests added up. Linda's neighbor and closest confidant, Mrs. Carter, had often warned her about the children's behavior. "Linda, you've given them everything, but they're taking advantage of your kindness," she would say, her voice tinged with concern. Linda would smile weakly, unable to admit that she already knew this truth. One day, Linda came home from work to find her savings account nearly drained. The children had discovered her bank details and, without her consent, transferred large sums to their accounts. It was the final blow. Linda confronted them, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "How could you do this to me? I've given you everything," she cried. But her words fell on deaf ears. Jack shrugged, Sarah deflected, and Michael avoided her gaze altogether. They were unapologetic, and Linda felt a profound sense of betrayal. That night, as Linda sat alone at the kitchen table, a plan began to form in her mind. She realized that her sacrifices had not taught her children gratitude or responsibility. Instead, they had fostered entitlement and greed. It was a harsh truth to accept, but Linda knew she had to act. She decided to rewrite her will, ensuring that her life's work would not go to waste. With Mrs. Carter's help, she contacted a lawyer and set the wheels in motion. The new will was unconventional. Instead of leaving her modest estate to her children, Linda allocated the majority of her assets to a community trust fund. The fund would support local charities, scholarships, and projects that aligned with Linda's values of kindness and compassion. A smaller portion was left to Mrs. Carter, who had been a pillar of support throughout Linda's life. As for her children, Linda left them letters, one for each, explaining her decisions and expressing her hopes for their future. Linda kept the changes a secret, continuing her life as usual. She still baked bread and pastries at the bakery, still attended church on Sundays, and still smiled at her children when they visited, though their visits were infrequent and often motivated by financial need. Despite everything, Linda loved them deeply, and she hoped that her final act would teach them the lessons she had failed to impart during her lifetime. Months turned into years, and Linda's health began to decline. She was diagnosed with a chronic illness but chose to keep it from her children, fearing they would see it as another burden. Mrs. Carter was the only one who knew, and she promised to honor Linda's wishes when the time came. One crisp autumn morning, Linda passed away peacefully in her sleep. The news spread quickly through Elmwood, and the community mourned the loss of a kind and selfless woman. Jack, Sarah, and Michael, however, saw her death through a different lens. They were consumed by thoughts of inheritance, each imagining how their lives would change once they received their share. The day of the will reading arrived, and the children gathered at the lawyer's office. They were all dressed in black, their expressions a mix of solemnity and anticipation. The lawyer, a stern yet compassionate man named Mr. Grayson, began by reading Linda's letter to her children. It was a heartfelt message, filled with love but also firm truths. She acknowledged their flaws, expressed her disappointment, and shared her hopes for their growth. Then came the announcement of the will. As Mr. Grayson revealed the details, the room fell silent. Jack's face turned red with anger, Sarah's jaw dropped in disbelief, and Michael stared blankly at the floor. The realization hit them like a tidal wave. They were left with nothing but the letters and their mother's final lesson. The lawyer handed each of them their letter, and as they opened them, a range of emotions swept over the siblings: anger, regret, and, for the first time, a glimmer of self-awareness. Linda's words were a mirror, reflecting the consequences of their actions and the pain they had caused her. The shock of that moment would stay with them forever, but what they chose to do with it was yet to be seen. The story of Linda Harrington and her children rippled through the small town of Elmwood, with whispers and speculation dominating conversations in coffee shops and church halls. People who had known Linda for years were stunned by the revelations from her will. Many had seen her children as entitled, but no one had anticipated the extent of their actions, or Linda's bold response. Jack, Sarah, and Michael returned to their childhood home in a state of shock. The house, now an empty vessel of memories, seemed colder and more oppressive than they remembered. Each of them clutched the letters their mother had left, unable to summon the courage to open them just yet. The silence between them was heavy, their usual bickering replaced by an unspoken recognition of what they had lost. Jack was the first to break the silence. He slammed his fist on the dining table, the sound echoing through the room. "This is insane. Mom must have been manipulated. There's no way she'd leave everything to a charity and that old neighbor." His voice was laced with anger, but deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. Was it possible that his mother had seen through him all along? Sarah, sitting on the couch with her arms crossed, rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. Manipulated? She probably wanted to punish us. It's just like her to be dramatic and self-righteous." But her words lacked conviction. The memory of her mother's tired eyes and gentle reproaches began to creep into her mind, making her shift uncomfortably. Michael, who had been pacing near the window, finally spoke. His voice was softer, almost hesitant. "Maybe we deserved it. I mean, think about it. We weren't exactly great to her." His words hung in the air, unacknowledged but undeniable. The three of them eventually retired to their separate rooms, each lost in their own thoughts. Jack, ever the pragmatist, began making calls to lawyers, hoping to contest the will. Sarah turned to social media, venting her frustration in vague posts about family betrayal. Michael, however, found himself drawn to his mother's letter. He unfolded the paper with trembling hands and began to read. Linda's words were simple yet profound. She recounted memories of Michael's childhood, his laughter, his kindness, and his curiosity. She spoke of the hopes she had for him and the sadness she felt watching him follow in his siblings' footsteps. "You are better than this, Michael," she wrote. "I know you are. My greatest wish is for you to find your way back to the person you were meant to be." Michael felt a lump rise in his throat. He couldn't remember the last time he had made his mother proud, and the realization hit him like a wave. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his pocket, vowing to revisit it later. Meanwhile, the news of Linda's will had reached Mrs. Carter. Though she had been prepared for this day, the reality of it was bittersweet. She missed her dear friend deeply, but she also felt a sense of responsibility to carry out Linda's wishes. The trust fund Linda had established was no small sum, and its potential to transform the community was immense. Mrs. Carter spent the next few days meeting with local organizations, discussing how the funds could be used to benefit Elmwood. One such meeting was with the principal of the local high school, who suggested a scholarship program for underprivileged students. Another was with the head of a local food pantry, who proposed expanding their services to reach more families in need. Each idea aligned perfectly with Linda's values, and Mrs. Carter felt a renewed sense of purpose in ensuring her friend's legacy lived on. Back at the Harrington house, tensions were brewing. Jack's attempts to contest the will had hit a wall. The lawyer assured him that Linda's decisions were ironclad. Sarah, frustrated by the lack of support for her online rants, began to reflect, albeit reluctantly, on her own role in the situation. Michael, on the other hand, had started volunteering at the community center, a small but meaningful step toward redeeming himself. One evening, as the three siblings sat together in the living room, Michael broke the silence. "I went to the community center today," he said, his voice steady. "They're starting a program with the money Mom left. A scholarship for kids who can't afford college." Jack scoffed. "And that's supposed to make up for her leaving us with nothing?" "It's not about us," Michael replied. "It's about what she believed in. Maybe we should try to understand that." Sarah looked at him skeptically. "And what, you think volunteering is going to fix everything?" "That's cute, Michael." "It's not about fixing anything," Michael said, his tone growing firmer. "It's about honoring her. Don't you think she deserves that much?" His words struck a chord, though neither Jack nor Sarah would admit it. The conversation ended there, but the seeds of change had been sown. Over the next few weeks, Michael continued his efforts at the community center. He found a sense of fulfillment in helping others, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Slowly, he began sharing stories about his mother with the people he met, painting a picture of a woman who had given everything for her family and her community. Jack and Sarah, meanwhile, were grappling with their own emotions. Jack, always the most stubborn of the three, found himself drawn to his mother's letter late one night. As he read her words, he was struck by the depth of her love for him, despite his flaws. "You've always been so driven, Jack," she wrote. "But I wish you'd remember that true success isn't measured in wealth or power. It's in the kindness you show to others and the integrity you live by." For the first time in years, Jack felt a pang of guilt that he couldn't ignore. He began visiting the community center, initially out of curiosity but eventually out of genuine interest. Sarah, too, found herself reflecting on her mother's sacrifices. She started small, donating some of her possessions to a local thrift store and attending a few community events. The siblings' transformation was slow and far from complete, but it was real. They began to see their mother's actions not as a punishment but as a final lesson, a way to guide them toward the lives she had always hoped they would lead. As the weeks turned into months, the community of Elmwood began to change as well. The scholarship program was launched, providing opportunities for students who had never dreamed of attending college. The food pantry expanded its reach, ensuring that no family in Elmwood went hungry. And through it all, Linda's name became synonymous with generosity and love. One day, Mrs. Carter invited the Harrington siblings to attend a ceremony dedicating the new scholarship program. The event was modest but heartfelt, with speeches from students, teachers, and community leaders. When it was Michael's turn to speak, he stood before the crowd with his mother's letter in hand. "My mother was the kindest, strongest person I've ever known," he began, his voice steady. "She gave everything she had to make our lives better, even when we didn't deserve it. And in the end, she gave even more. She gave this town a chance to thrive. I hope we can all honor her by continuing to give, not just money, but time, compassion, and understanding." The audience erupted into applause, and for the first time, Jack and Sarah felt a sense of pride, not in themselves, but in the legacy their mother had left behind. They knew they still had a long way to go, but they also knew they had taken the first steps on a path their mother would have been proud of. The Harrington children would never be the same, and neither would Elmwood. Linda's final act had set in motion a chain of events that transformed not just her family, but an entire community. And in the quiet moments, when they found themselves thinking of her, they understood that her greatest gift had been her unwavering love and belief in the power of change. The weeks following the scholarship program's dedication ceremony brought an unexpected sense of renewal to the town of Elmwood. The community buzzed with activity, as Linda Harrington's legacy inspired people to contribute their time, skills, and ideas to build a better future. However, within the Harrington family, the ripples of change were slower and more personal. Jack, Sarah, and Michael continued to wrestle with their past actions and the weight of their mother's words. The shock of being excluded from the will had initially driven them apart, but over time, it began to serve as a strange thread that tethered them together. Each of them started reflecting on their mother's life and the sacrifices she had made, their individual realizations pulling them in directions they hadn't anticipated. Jack, ever the pragmatist, found himself obsessing over his failures. He couldn't shake the image of his mother's tired face, etched with worry, as she handed over her hard-earned savings for his ill-fated business ventures. He had always prided himself on being a visionary, but Linda's letter had laid bare the flaws in his character. Her words, though gentle, had struck a nerve. "Jack, I've always admired your determination, but I wish you had learned to pair it with kindness and humility. A true leader lifts others up, not just himself." One evening, Jack decided to revisit the community center Michael had spoken about. He approached with trepidation, unsure of what he hoped to find. Inside, the space was bustling with energy, children laughing as they worked on art projects, volunteers sorting donations, and a group of teenagers discussing their future college plans. Jack felt out of place, but he pushed through his discomfort and offered to help. The center's director, a woman named Carla, welcomed him warmly and assigned him to assist with a mentorship program for aspiring young entrepreneurs. At first, Jack struggled to connect. The teenagers were wary of his no-nonsense demeanor, and his initial attempts to share his knowledge came across as condescending. But as the weeks passed, Jack began to adapt. He listened more, shared his own failures as cautionary tales, and found genuine joy in guiding the students. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose that wasn't tied to personal gain. Meanwhile, Sarah's journey was unfolding in a completely different way. Known for her charm and social savvy, Sarah had always been able to manipulate situations to her advantage. But her mother's letter had cut through her carefully constructed facade. "Sarah," Linda had written, "you have a gift for connecting with people, but you've used it in ways that hurt more than help. I hope you'll find the courage to use your talents for good." At first, Sarah dismissed the letter as sentimental nonsense. But the words lingered, echoing in her mind during quiet moments. One day, while scrolling through her phone, she came across a post about a local fashion show benefiting the scholarship fund her mother had established. On a whim, she decided to attend. The event was a modest affair, but Sarah was struck by the passion and creativity of the participants. She introduced herself to the organizers, who eagerly invited her to get involved. Sarah began volunteering her time, helping to plan fundraisers and events. Her natural charisma and organizational skills proved invaluable, and she quickly became a key figure in the group. For the first time, Sarah felt as though she was part of something meaningful, rather than merely pursuing her own interests. As for Michael, his transformation had started earlier, but it was no less profound. Volunteering at the community center had given him a sense of direction, but it also forced him to confront the depth of his guilt. Linda's letter had been both a balm and a challenge. "Michael," she had written, "you've always had a kind heart, but you've let yourself be influenced by the wrong things. I believe in you. I believe you can be better." Determined to live up to his mother's faith in him, Michael threw himself into his work at the center. He helped organize food drives, tutored children in math and science, and even started a gardening project to teach sustainability. His efforts didn't go unnoticed, and he began to build a reputation as someone who could be relied upon. One day, while working in the community garden, Michael struck up a conversation with an elderly man named Mr. Grayson, who had been one of Linda's longtime friends. Mr. Grayson shared stories about Linda's generosity and resilience, painting a picture of a woman whose impact extended far beyond her family. "Your mother was a remarkable woman," Mr. Grayson said, his voice tinged with emotion. "She believed in the power of small acts to create big change. And she believed in you." The words resonated deeply with Michael, reaffirming his commitment to honor his mother's memory. He began reaching out to his siblings, urging them to join him in his efforts. At first, Jack and Sarah were hesitant, but Michael's persistence eventually won them over. Slowly, the three of them began working together, contributing their unique skills to the community projects inspired by Linda's legacy. Their collaboration wasn't without its challenges. Old habits and rivalries occasionally resurfaced, leading to heated arguments and misunderstandings. But each time, they found a way to move forward, driven by a shared desire to make their mother proud. Over time, their efforts began to yield tangible results. The scholarship fund grew, enabling more students to pursue higher education. The community center expanded its programs, offering new opportunities for residents of all ages. And the food pantry, now fully stocked and well-staffed, became a lifeline for families in need. The impact of Linda's legacy was undeniable, and it brought a renewed sense of hope and unity to Elmwood. For the Harrington siblings, the journey was transformative. Jack, once consumed by ambition, discovered the joy of mentorship and the satisfaction of seeing others succeed. Sarah, who had spent years chasing superficial goals, found fulfillment in building connections and creating positive change. And Michael, who had struggled with self-doubt, emerged as a leader in the community, embodying the values his mother had always hoped to instill. As the months turned into a year, the Harrington family found themselves standing together at the unveiling of a new community project, a park dedicated to Linda Harrington's memory. The park, funded by donations and built by volunteers, featured a playground, a garden, and a quiet space for reflection. At its center stood a plaque with Linda's name and a simple inscription, "A life dedicated to love, kindness, and hope." As the crowd gathered for the ceremony, Jack stepped forward to speak. His voice, once commanding and self-assured, now carried a note of humility. "Our mother taught us many things, but perhaps her greatest lesson was that true wealth isn't measured in money or possessions. It's measured in the impact we have on others." Today, we stand here as a family, not just to honor her memory, but to continue her work. We are grateful for the chance to make things right, and we hope to make her proud. The applause that followed was thunderous, a testament to the love and respect Linda had earned in her lifetime. For Jack, Sarah, and Michael, it was a moment of redemption, a chance to show the world, and themselves, that they had finally understood the values their mother had lived by. As the crowd dispersed and the sun began to set, the siblings lingered in the park, sharing memories and laughter. It was a moment of connection they hadn't experienced in years, and it felt like a fitting tribute to the woman who had brought them into the world. Their journey was far from over, but they knew they were on the right path. And in the quiet of the evening, as they sat together under the stars, they felt their mother's presence, a gentle reminder that love, even in the face of loss, had the power to heal, transform, and endure. The Harrington siblings had reached a pivotal point in their lives. Their journey of transformation, spurred by their mother's will and legacy, had brought them closer together and opened their eyes to the value of giving back. Yet, the most profound test of their growth was still to come, and it would challenge everything they thought they had learned. The months following the park dedication brought stability and purpose to the siblings' lives. Jack continued mentoring young entrepreneurs at the community center, finding pride in their successes. Sarah had become a driving force behind charity events and fundraisers, using her social skills to inspire others to contribute. Michael, now a cornerstone of the community's initiatives, was even being approached for leadership roles. They had rebuilt their reputations and begun to feel that their mother's faith in them had not been misplaced. But as the saying goes, life is rarely content to let peace linger. One crisp winter morning, an unexpected visitor arrived in Elmwood, bringing with them a revelation that would once again test the siblings' character. The visitor was a man named Robert Langley, a lawyer representing a distant branch of the Harrington family tree. He carried with him a box of documents and an expression that suggested the contents were no small matter. Robert arranged to meet the siblings at the community center, where he explained the purpose of his visit. Decades earlier, a piece of land on the outskirts of Elmwood had been purchased by their grandfather. The land, believed to be unremarkable at the time, had remained untouched and largely forgotten. However, recent developments revealed that it sat atop a natural gas deposit, making it potentially worth millions. The news hit the siblings like a bolt of lightning. After years of financial struggle, the idea of sudden wealth was intoxicating. Yet, the implications of such a windfall were complex. The land was technically inherited by the three of them, but it was also tied to their mother's legacy. What would Linda have wanted them to do with this newfound fortune? Jack was the first to voice his thoughts, his old habits of ambition and calculation resurfacing. "We need to be smart about this," he said, pacing the room. "If we handle this right, we could not only secure our futures but also expand the community programs Mom cared about." Sarah, while tempted by the idea of financial security, was more cautious. "But how do we balance that?" she asked. "If we just keep it for ourselves, it feels like we're betraying everything Mom stood for. But if we give it all away, we're back to square one." Michael, who had grown into the role of moral compass for the group, listened quietly before speaking. "Mom wouldn't want us to act out of greed or fear. She'd want us to think about what's right, not just for us, but for the people around us." The conversation quickly turned heated. Jack argued for a business-minded approach, suggesting they sell the land and split the profits, with a portion set aside for community projects. Sarah leaned toward donating the entire fortune to Linda's trust fund, fearing that any personal gain would undo the progress they had made. Michael, torn between his siblings' perspectives, proposed a compromise: retain partial ownership of the land while using the profits to benefit the town. The debate raged for days, with no clear resolution in sight. The community, unaware of the siblings' dilemma, continued to thrive under the programs funded by Linda's original will. The siblings, however, found themselves at odds, the unity they had worked so hard to build beginning to fray under the pressure. One evening, seeking clarity, Michael decided to revisit the place where he always felt closest to his mother, the park dedicated in her name. As he sat on a bench beneath a plaque bearing her inscription, he noticed Mrs. Carter approaching. The elderly woman, who had been a steadfast presence in their lives, took a seat beside him. "You look troubled, Michael," she said, her tone warm but concerned. "What's on your mind?" Michael hesitated before explaining the situation. Mrs. Carter listened intently, her expression thoughtful. When he finished, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your mother was a wise woman," she said. "She understood that money can be both a blessing and a burden. But more than that, she understood the importance of intention. What matters most isn't what you do with the money, it's why you do it. The words struck a chord with Michael, and he shared them with Jack and Sarah the next day. Slowly, the siblings began to find common ground, focusing less on the specifics of their decision and more on the values that would guide it. They agreed to consult with community leaders, seeking input on how the money could make the greatest impact. They also set personal limits, ensuring that their own needs wouldn't overshadow their mother's legacy. Ultimately, the siblings decided to sell a portion of the land, using the proceeds to establish a new initiative, the Linda Harrington Foundation for Growth and Opportunity. The foundation would support not only scholarships and community programs but also small business grants, environmental conservation efforts, and mental health resources. The remaining land would be preserved as a nature reserve, honoring Linda's love for simplicity and beauty. The announcement of the foundation was met with overwhelming support from the community. At the launch event, held in the town square, the siblings stood together on a makeshift stage, addressing the crowd. Jack spoke first, his voice steady but filled with emotion. This foundation isn't just about honoring our mother's memory. It's about continuing her work and ensuring that her values live on in all of us. Sarah followed, her usual charm tempered with sincerity. We've made mistakes, and we've learned from them. This is our way of giving back and making things right, not just for our family, but for Elmwood. Finally, Michael stepped forward, holding his mother's letter. Mom believed in second chances. She believed in growth, in change, and in the power of community. This foundation is our second chance, and we hope it will be a source of hope and opportunity for generations to come. The applause that followed was deafening, a testament to the town's belief in the Harringtons' transformation. As the event concluded, the siblings mingled with the crowd, hearing stories of how Linda's legacy had already touched countless lives. For the first time, they felt a sense of peace, not because of what they had gained, but because of what they were able to give. In the weeks and months that followed, the foundation became a cornerstone of Elmwood's growth. The siblings, now working as a team, found fulfillment in their roles. Jack used his business acumen to manage the foundation's finances, ensuring its sustainability. Sarah took charge of public relations and event planning, using her natural charisma to inspire others. Michael, the heart of the operation, oversaw the community outreach programs, ensuring that the foundation remained true to its mission. The Harrington siblings had come full circle, their journey of redemption bringing them closer not only to each other but also to the ideals their mother had cherished. They knew that their work was far from over, but they welcomed the challenges ahead, confident in the strength they had found in themselves and in each other. As they stood together one evening, watching the sun set over the park that bore their mother's name, they felt a profound sense of gratitude. Linda Harrington's legacy had not only transformed their lives, it had given them the chance to transform the lives of others. And in that moment, they knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. The Linda Harrington Foundation quickly became a beacon of hope and transformation for the town of Elmwood. Its programs touched every corner of the community, from providing scholarships for underprivileged students to funding small businesses and preserving the local environment. The Harrington siblings, who once embodied the very definition of selfishness and entitlement, now found themselves at the heart of a growing movement rooted in generosity and compassion. But growth often comes with challenges, and the foundation's success brought with it a series of trials that would test not only the siblings' resolve but also their ability to live up to their mother's legacy. It started with a controversy over one of the foundation's scholarship recipients. A young man named Eric Barlow had been awarded a full scholarship to attend a prestigious university. Eric was bright, ambitious, and determined to succeed, but his past was riddled with mistakes. A few years earlier, he had been involved in a petty theft incident that, though minor, had left a stain on his reputation. When news of Eric's scholarship spread, whispers began to circulate. Some in the community questioned whether someone with a troubled history deserved such an opportunity. Jack, Sarah, and Michael were caught off guard by the backlash. Jack, ever the pragmatist, suggested revoking the scholarship to avoid damaging the foundation's reputation. "We can't afford to lose the community's trust," he argued during a heated meeting at the foundation's office. Sarah, however, was adamant that revoking the scholarship would send the wrong message. "Mom believed in second chances," she countered. "If we turn our backs on Eric now, we're betraying everything she stood for." Michael, torn between his siblings' opposing views, sought out Eric to hear his side of the story. They met at the community center, where Eric was volunteering as part of his scholarship agreement. The young man spoke candidly about his past, taking full responsibility for his actions and expressing deep gratitude for the chance the foundation had given him. "This scholarship isn't just about me," Eric said. "It's about proving that people can change if they're given the chance." Inspired by Eric's sincerity, Michael returned to his siblings with a proposal. They would stand by their decision to support Eric but also use the controversy as an opportunity to start a new program. The foundation would launch a mentorship initiative for at-risk youth, pairing them with mentors who could guide them toward better choices. It was a risky move, but one that aligned with the values their mother had instilled in them. The decision proved to be a turning point. The mentorship program not only addressed the concerns raised by Eric's critics but also became one of the foundation's most successful initiatives. Eric himself became a mentor, using his experiences to inspire others to overcome their own challenges. The siblings learned an invaluable lesson: true leadership required not just making difficult decisions, but standing by them with integrity and compassion. As the foundation grew, so did the siblings' responsibilities. Jack found himself juggling the foundation's financial management with his ongoing mentorship work at the community center. The demands were relentless, and Jack began to feel the strain. One evening, he confided in Sarah, admitting that he sometimes doubted his ability to live up to their mother's expectations. Sarah, who had also been grappling with her own challenges, offered him words of encouragement. "Mom didn't expect us to be perfect, Jack," she said. "She just wanted us to try our best. And you're doing that. We all are." Sarah's own struggles had taken a different form. While she thrived in her role as the foundation's public face, she found it difficult to let go of her old habits of seeking validation through material success. The temptation to revert to her previous lifestyle was always present, especially as she became more visible in the community. But each time she felt herself wavering, she remembered her mother's words: "Use your gifts to help others, Sarah. That's where you'll find true happiness." To keep herself grounded, Sarah began volunteering at the local women's shelter, where she met women whose lives had been upended by circumstances beyond their control. Their resilience and determination inspired her, reminding her of her mother's strength. Slowly but surely, Sarah began to redefine her sense of self-worth, finding fulfillment in the connections she made and the lives she helped improve. Michael, meanwhile, had become the heart of the foundation, working tirelessly to oversee its programs and ensure they stayed true to their mission. His passion for the work was undeniable, but it came at a cost. Michael often found himself neglecting his own well-being, pushing himself to the brink of exhaustion. Mrs. Carter, who remained a close confidant, noticed the toll it was taking on him and pulled him aside one afternoon. "Your mother was one of the most selfless people I've ever known," Mrs. Carter said gently. "But even she knew the importance of taking care of herself. You can't pour from an empty cup, Michael. Don't forget that." Her words stayed with Michael, prompting him to make small but meaningful changes. He started delegating tasks, trusting the foundation's team to share the workload. He also began carving out time for himself, reconnecting with old hobbies like hiking and photography. The balance he found allowed him to approach his work with renewed energy and focus. As the siblings navigated their individual challenges, they also faced an unexpected opportunity. A wealthy philanthropist named Eleanor Brighton, known for her support of grassroots organizations, expressed interest in partnering with the foundation. Eleanor's influence and resources could take the foundation's work to the next level, but her proposal came with conditions. She wanted the foundation to expand its reach beyond Elmwood, focusing on larger, regional initiatives. The idea was both exciting and daunting. Expanding the foundation's scope would mean reaching more people, but it also risked losing the personal, community-centered approach that made it special. The siblings spent weeks debating the proposal, consulting with their team and the community. Ultimately, they decided to pursue a middle ground. They accepted Eleanor's partnership but insisted on maintaining a strong presence in Elmwood while carefully expanding to nearby towns. The compromise allowed the foundation to grow without losing its roots, and the collaboration proved to be a success. Eleanor became not only a benefactor but also a mentor to the siblings, sharing her insights and helping them navigate the complexities of running a philanthropic organization. As the foundation entered its second year, the siblings reflected on how far they had come. They had faced controversies, challenges, and difficult decisions, but each trial had brought them closer to the people they wanted to be. Their mother's vision had become a reality, not just through the programs they had built, but through the personal growth they had experienced. The turning point came during the Foundation's annual gala, held at a historic venue in Elmwood. The event was a celebration of the Foundation's achievements and a tribute to Linda Harrington's legacy. As the siblings stood together on stage, addressing a crowd of supporters, they felt an overwhelming sense of pride and gratitude. Jack spoke first, his voice steady and heartfelt. "This foundation started as a way to honor our mother, but it's become so much more. It's a testament to the power of community and the belief that change is always possible." Sarah followed, her eyes glistening with emotion. "We've learned so much over the past 2 years, about ourselves, about each other, and about what it means to truly give. None of this would have been possible without all of you." Finally, Michael stepped forward, holding their mother's original letter. "Mom believed in us, even when we didn't believe in ourselves. She taught us that redemption isn't about erasing the past, it's about building a better future. And that's what we're committed to doing." The applause that followed was deafening, a powerful affirmation of everything they had worked for. As the evening continued, the siblings mingled with guests, sharing stories and hearing firsthand how the foundation had impacted lives. For the first time in years, they felt truly at peace, not because they had achieved perfection, but because they had embraced their imperfections and used them as a foundation for growth. They knew their journey was far from over, but they were ready to face whatever came next, united in their purpose and guided by their mother's enduring spirit. As the Linda Harrington Foundation entered its third year, its impact on the town of Elmwood and beyond was undeniable. The siblings, Jack, Sarah, and Michael, had transformed from self-absorbed individuals into leaders who championed their mother's values of compassion, resilience, and selflessness. Yet, their journey was far from complete. The foundation's growth brought new challenges, and the siblings found themselves navigating a world of increasingly complex decisions that tested their unity and convictions. One such challenge came in the form of an unexpected crisis. A regional corporation, Amethyst Energy, announced plans to build a processing plant near the outskirts of Elmwood. While the project promised economic growth and job creation, it also posed significant environmental risks to the town and its surrounding areas, including the nature reserve established as part of the Harrington Foundation's initiatives. The news sparked a heated debate within the community. Some residents supported the project, eager for the economic opportunities it promised. Others, including environmental advocates, opposed it vehemently, fearing it would destroy the natural beauty and ecological balance of the region. The foundation, as a prominent voice in Elmwood, was expected to take a stand, a decision that would inevitably divide opinions and potentially strain the goodwill they had worked so hard to cultivate. Jack, with his pragmatic approach, initially saw potential in the project. "If we negotiate carefully, we could secure funding for community programs and ensure the plant operates responsibly," he argued during a foundation meeting. "This could be a win-win for everyone." Sarah, however, was skeptical. "We can't ignore the environmental impact," Jack. "Mom's legacy is about preserving and uplifting the community, not compromising it for short-term gains." Michael, caught between his siblings' opposing viewpoints, felt the weight of the decision bearing down on him. "We need more information," he said. "Let's talk to both sides, the company, the environmental groups, and the residents, and figure out what's truly best for Elmwood." The siblings spent weeks gathering information, meeting with representatives from Amethyst Energy, local environmentalists, and concerned citizens. The process was grueling, filled with impassioned arguments and conflicting perspectives. At times, the pressure threatened to fracture the unity the siblings had worked so hard to rebuild. During one particularly tense meeting, Mrs. Carter, who had been observing their struggles from a distance, decided to intervene. She invited the siblings to her home for tea, where she shared a story about their mother that none of them had heard before. "Years ago," Mrs. Carter began, "your mother was faced with a similar dilemma. The bakery she worked at was struggling financially, and the owner considered selling it to a chain that would have changed everything. Your mother was torn. She loved the bakery and what it represented for our town, but she also understood the owner's predicament. What did she do?" Michael asked, leaning forward. "She didn't choose a side," Mrs. Carter said with a smile. "Instead, she brought everyone together, the owner, the staff, and even the customers, to find a solution. They came up with a plan to revitalize the bakery, and it worked. That's who your mother was, someone who believed in the power of collaboration and compromise." The story resonated deeply with the siblings, reminding them of the values their mother had lived by. Inspired by her example, they decided to approach the Amethyst Energy situation with the same spirit of unity and problem-solving. The siblings organized a town hall meeting, inviting representatives from the company, environmental groups, and local residents to share their perspectives. The event was tense at first, with heated exchanges threatening to derail the conversation. But as Jack, Sarah, and Michael facilitated the discussion, they managed to steer the focus toward finding common ground. By the end of the night, a tentative agreement had been reached. Amethyst Energy agreed to scale down the size of the plant, implement stringent environmental safeguards, and invest in local infrastructure and community programs. The nature reserve would remain untouched, and a portion of the company's profits would fund conservation efforts in the region. The compromise wasn't perfect, but it was a solution that balanced economic development with environmental preservation. The decision earned the foundation both praise and criticism, but the siblings stood by it, confident that they had acted in the best interest of Elmwood. The crisis proved to be a turning point, solidifying the foundation's role as a mediator and advocate for the community. It also strengthened the bond between the siblings, who had learned to trust and support each other in even the most difficult circumstances. As the years passed, the foundation continued to grow, expanding its reach to neighboring towns and inspiring similar initiatives in other communities. The siblings, once defined by their individual flaws and insecurities, became a unified force for good. Jack's strategic thinking, Sarah's charisma, and Michael's empathy complemented each other, creating a leadership team that was greater than the sum of its parts. Their personal lives also flourished. Jack found fulfillment in his mentorship work and began mentoring young leaders within the foundation, passing on the lessons he had learned. Sarah, who had discovered a passion for storytelling, started a podcast that highlighted stories of resilience and redemption, drawing on her own experiences and those of the people she met through the foundation. Michael, ever the heart of the family, became a respected voice in the nonprofit world, advocating for grassroots solutions to global challenges. Despite their successes, the siblings never lost sight of their roots. They continued to honor their mother's memory in everything they did, from small acts of kindness to major decisions that shaped the foundation's future. Their journey had been far from easy, but it had brought them closer not only to each other but also to the person their mother had always believed they could become. On the 5th anniversary of Linda Harrington's passing, the siblings hosted a special event at the park dedicated to her memory. The gathering was a celebration of her life and the impact of her legacy, bringing together people from all walks of life who had been touched by her kindness and generosity. As the sun set over the park, casting a golden glow on the crowd, Michael stepped onto the stage to deliver the closing remarks. Holding his mother's original letter, he addressed the audience with a voice filled with emotion. "My mother believed in the power of love, resilience, and community," he said. "She taught us that redemption isn't about erasing our mistakes, it's about learning from them and using them to build something better. This foundation is her legacy, but it's also a reminder that each of us has the power to create change, no matter where we start or how far we have to go." The crowd erupted into applause, a standing ovation that echoed across the park. As Jack and Sarah joined Michael on stage, the three siblings stood together, their hearts full of gratitude and pride. In that moment, they knew they had fulfilled their mother's greatest wish, not just by continuing her work, but by becoming the people she had always known they could be. As the event came to a close, the siblings lingered in the park, watching as families, friends, and neighbors shared laughter and stories under the stars. It was a scene that encapsulated everything Linda Harrington had stood for: love, connection, and hope. And in that quiet, beautiful moment, her children felt her presence, a gentle reminder that her spirit would forever be a part of their lives, guiding them toward a brighter future.